For Finance in Gauteng, Barbara Creecy, tabled her midterm budget in the legislature today. Gauteng is the country's smallest but richest province, but there are problems, especially in health. The main increases in allocations were for infrastructure, followed by health and education. The total budget is sitting at 123 billion rand after Gauteng decided to self-fund an additional nearly 2 billion. To discuss, we're joined by the MEC Barbara Creecy. Thanks for being with us, MEC.
Good evening.
Firstly, what is the state of finances in Gauteng? We're this rich province, but we know that people are flooding in. I was talking about health and recently babies dying. We're hearing again about overcrowding in hospitals, that we're not coping, a shortage of beds. So just start with where you think we're at.
Well, obviously immigration is a constant challenge for this province, and I think treading the thin line between making sure that we are able to fund services and maintain services at a reasonable level and dealing with that immigration is a great challenge, as you say, particularly to the departments of health and education. You would know that 2 days ago, the Gauteng City Region Observatory presented their quality of life survey. And one of the things that they noted is, despite the constant in-migration, there is in fact a steady increase in the quality of life, and there has not been a decrease in the accessibility of services. And that obviously is a great tribute to the work that our departments and our municipalities are doing in the face of this in-migration.
If we look at health, I think last year it was around 40 million rand, the allocation. Billion, sorry. There are new allocations. Are those enough?
Look, obviously an adjustment process is not a major allocation. It's just to deal with unforeseen circumstances. One of the issues we're dealing with in health and education is the wage settlement that took place earlier this year. These departments, a large chunk of their budgets goes on salaries because their primary responsibility is to employ doctors, teachers, nurses, and so forth. So we felt it was important that we compensate both departments for the increased wage bill. We obviously also in education would be looking at trying to give MEC Lesufi some legroom in terms of the start of the new academic year, allow him to appoint additional teacher posts. In health, we've also given them some money to deal with the fire in the Bank of Lisbon. They have had to relocate to new offices, and they obviously need new furniture and equipment and so on.
Well, explain. So the midterm, is it similar to the national medium term, kind of looking ahead for years? If we say the budget is 123 billion rand, over what period are we talking?
Well, that is the Gauteng budget for the next 6 months until March. Obviously, one of the things we spoke about is the fact that because we didn't receive any new money from the national government, we've had to fund this from our own revenue. We've done quite well. Only 5% of our revenue comes from own revenue, but we've done quite well in that regard.
What is that own revenue? What does province
Motor vehicle licenses, taxes on gambling licenses, and also patient fees. That's where that revenue comes from.
The main new allocation, reportedly infrastructure. How are we as a province, Gauteng, trying to fit in sort of the grander national plans? So a lot of talk of infrastructure, adding to job creation, etc., etc.
Well, I think Gauteng has done reasonably well in terms of infrastructure spend. Over the last 3 years, we've averaged at about 97% spend on the infrastructure. Since the beginning of this term, that has added 42 billion to the provincial economy and created about 260,000 sustainable jobs and 499,000 EPWP opportunities. The main adjustment in this particular budget is to give more money to roads and transport. They've been doing very well on their spending, mainly for rehabilitation of roads. There's 86 million been given to the Department of Sport to complete 7 community libraries, and there have also been smaller amounts allocated to social development for occupational health and safety in community welfare facilities, and 20 million to COCTA, which is to help deal with the problem of the pump stations on the Vaal River, which, as you know, are spilling effluent into the river.
So does that solve the problem?
There are two issues there. The one is that there needs to be major refurbishment of the sanitation works, and that really falls within the domain of the National Department of Water and Sanitation. I think you would have seen that the Minister of Finance indicated that he was going to get engineers from the Army to assist with the refurbishment of the actual pump stations, which is the current crisis and leading to the effluent spill. We're making a contribution. I have sat in meetings with National Water and Sanitation where they've also indicated that they will make a contribution to that maintenance.
Talking about roads, you know, people who live in Sandton can't believe the richest square mile, the state of the roads. Sometimes robots out every time it rains. We look at lighting, things like that, and it's hard to tell what is under a municipality, what is provincial,
all of those things.
What is national. Where are the provincial roads? What are the state of those provincial roads?
Well, the provincial, I mean, anything that's in the urban centres are municipal roads. So Sandton CBD,
so we can't blame you for any of that.
It's a municipal function, you can't at all. We obviously are responsible for anything that's not the highways that run between cities and different parts of the province. Recently we have done a major refurbishment of the R28. We are working on the extension of William Nipkill. Those kinds of roads would be provincial roads, and we've done lots of rehabilitation. Most of those roads are more than 50, 60 years old, so they have needed a major facelift. And I must say the Department of Roads and Transport is doing well on its infrastructure spend, and that's why we've given them additional money.
Have you put enough money behind that? This is a concern. Well,
you can only give what you have. So obviously in any government you have to cut your coat according to your cloth. But where departments are spending well on infrastructure, we want to give them additional resources if we have it, because that obviously helps with facilities, but it also creates work.
What are the departments that you're worried about? You've raised the issue of irregular expenditure.
Yes. Look, I have to say that we are very happy about the fact that every single provincial department and entity got an unqualified auditor, and I must say we're the only province in the country that can boast that, and it's the third year in the row. So I'm very happy about that. Irregular expenditure is too high. Obviously, the big spenders, health, education, transport, are primarily responsible for that. We have done an intervention, the Gauteng open tender procurement system. It saved us 1.5 billion in irregular expenditure over the last year. We are going to, we've finished the bill. We want to enshrine it in law so that it becomes common practice, because I believe that it is really the only viable instrument that is going to help us with that problem going forward.
Well, often this term is bandied about, irregular expenditure. It's not necessarily corruption. Sometimes it's just papers not being filled in incorrectly. Tell us what you understand to be the serious problems there.
Well, I think the reason why we all have to be concerned about irregular expenditure as citizens is not because the money necessarily has walked out of the door. But if you have a fair and open public procurement system, then you are sure that you are getting the job done for the right price with competent contractors who are going to finish the job.
So this could be paying someone too much for the job, or not getting the right people in?
Yes, and it could be that you favoured somebody.
Which is corrupt.
Yeah, well, so that's why irregular expenditure has to be eliminated from the system. The Public Finance Management Act is there for a reason. And we want to see a situation where more and more departments are complying and getting clean audits. One of the things that we have shown is that there's absolutely no contradiction between the open tender procurement system and economic transformation. And we have a situation now where we can say without any doubt that 91% of the tenders that have been appointed through the open public procurement system have gone to historically disadvantaged
So this
companies.
move to make things more transparent is working?
I believe it is, yes.
If you look at irregular expenditure, final question, does this point to training skills as well, you know, where people are doing things because they don't know better? Years ago, government started admitting we've made too many political appointments in municipalities. So I'd like to know from you, what do you think the situation is in provincial departments? What's the ratio of technocrats to politicians? Are we getting it right?
Look, we've done an enormous amount of work over the last 4.5 years retraining everybody in provincial supply chain to make sure that they understand what the regulations are and that they feel competent to carry them out. Obviously, tender processes are complex, particularly in infrastructure departments. Often what goes wrong in those processes is the initial specs of the project. And if those are not perfect, you're going to have problems with the appointment and the allocation. So this is an area that we're working on, and what it means in many instances is that you've got to have adequate technical expertise right from the beginning of the process in order that you get your specifications right.
All right, you've given really full explanations tonight. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
For this somewhat murky subject of passing the money around for a province like Gauteng. That was the MEC for Finance in Gauteng, Barbara Creecy. All right, so I believe it's time for Sports Live. Tabiso, welcome.
It's good to see my former boss there. She used to, I think it was Barbara Creecy, used to be MEC for Sports in Gauteng. Yes, I remember. I used to work with her quite a while, long time ago. But anyway.
Well, impress her.